Welcome to But What If We Win with me, Zuri Horwitz. I ran for U.S. Congress, and because I really believe that if progressives win, we must have a plan. Listen to podcast number 1 to find out why that is and what the research says about that. Last week, we went into what we need to see in terms of accountability, addressing corruption in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. A lot of impeach, remove, and prosecute in the executive. A lot of banning stock trading, betting, and crypto in the legislative branch, as well as stopping them from becoming lobbyists. And in the judicial branch, having an enforceable code of ethics. And also, we can expand and retract the Supreme Court. Another thing I did want to bring up, because Norm Eisen brought it up, and I think it is a good point, because I did come out against term limits. Term limits at 18, and this was on the Amicus podcast with Dahlia Lithwick. Term limits for 18 years would make sense on the judicial branch, and I can understand that. I still do think that we need to have an upper limit for the age of justices. And yeah, so that's another one that we can do. It won't matter as much this time, because I think what's going to happen is Alito and Thomas will retire very soon. But we can also get people on ethics violations, and I think having there be the possibility that you can be impeached and removed if you act unethically, if you are not displaying good behavior, is really important. All right, so there will be 2 parts to this one. The first one will be the May Day Roundup, which is all about labor. This is obviously just a non-exhaustive list of some legislation and some things that need to happen for labor to thrive in our country. We will have another episode that's more full, but I wanted to have something because it's happening right now. So first off, what is May Day? May Day has its roots right here in the United States. I'm taking this from rsn.org in 1886 in the streets of Chicago, where workers were organizing and fighting for the 8-hour workday. And I think this is really important to highlight. They were fighting for something big. I'm not interested in a May Day that talks about how great these people were. I want to see the great fights that we can have, in terms of having higher pay, in terms of having safer workplaces, having PTO, having good staffing. That's the kind of work that I want to be doing. P.S. If you're in the healthcare industry and you want to contact me, let me know. Okay, this demand was met with brutal resistance by employers who used both vicious mercenaries and the police to violently suppress mass protests led by unions. A bomb exploded in Chicago's Haymarket Square during a clash between workers and police on May 4th, 1886, killing several police officers and others. So, that's a really quick rundown. That's not the whole thing. But I think it is really important to just have a little framework for why we are where we are and making sure that we're up for it. And so right now, Sean Fain from the UAW president is calling for a general strike in 2028. Of course, I think the midterms are more important right now, but it takes time to build towards a general strike, so we'll talk about it. But I think that there's more that we can do and that we will keep building to. So he wants a general strike, and this is what a general strike is. This is from Wikipedia. A general strike is a strike action in which a substantial proportion of the total labor force in a city, region, or country participates. General strikes are characterized by the participation of workers from a multitude of workplaces across different industries and tend to involve entire communities. They are often used to strengthen the bargaining position of a trade union or achieve a common social or political goal. My whole thing, and it will continue to be my whole thing, is that if we take action, if we have a general strike, we have to be very, very, very clear about what our goals are for that general strike. So far, what I've seen is tax the rich, abolish ICE, no war. These are still not extremely specific. I mean, does that mean removing all troops from, being involved in Iran? Does that mean completely eradicating and making sure that we have a force to prosecute ICE? It requires some infrastructure. Tax the rich. What is the tax plan for that? I mean, that's why this podcast exists, to kind of talk about what that would look like. So why have a general strike on May Day 2028 so far in the future? The UAW, which is the United Auto Workers president, Shawn Fain, who I just talked about, called for a general strike on May Day 2028 so that unions will have a contract expiring soon to align with closer to the expiration to April 30th, 2028. So it would mean that union workers would be allowed to strike, because if they don't align their contracts correctly, then they could be fined, then they could be fired for striking. These are the ways that UAW is suggesting people get involved. Align your contract. This is again from UAW. If you have a contract expiring soon, push to align the expiration date to as close to April 30th, 2028 as possible. Get strike ready. Building the strike weapons takes lots of work and preparation. They need a lot of unions to strike, and making sure that you have the resources on hand, having like money, having food, having healthcare available so that people aren't all on their own. That's my take from that. Make bigger demands of our employers and our government. The working class is hurting, and we need massive transformational change to take our lives back from billionaires. In my mind, this is supporting progressive candidates. We could be stuck with really bad people. If we get stuck on 2028 is when we'll take action, we need to continuously take small action now. For our Big Three membership, that looks like demanding retirement security from the bosses and the government, and then looking into what that looks like for you and your coworkers from them. Find our shared enemies. The billionaires use divide and conquer techniques to keep us smaller and weaker. Who can you link up with who has the same target? How can you work together between now and 2028 to build power and learn to coordinate? And they say organize, organize, organize. The labor movement is the smallest it's ever been. Not in a union, form one to be part of and fight for the future of the working class. I want to talk about Colorado specifically in a second, and how we are really impacted by terrible legislation in Colorado. Also learn about the pillars of support for a strike, making sure that you can get police, civil servants and politicians, education, religion, media, and the business community on our side. You can also go to there's a general strike place, just get, and then I will talk about ways to get involved next. Okay. So one thing that happened that really sucked in Colorado is the overtime threshold for agricultural workers. It increases the number of hours farm workers must be on the job before qualifying for overtime pay from 48 to 56 hours. So keep these people in mind and stop them from being reelected. We don't have any local Dems that voted for this legislation in El Paso County, but if you're in Colorado, try to stop Carter, Duran, Ferret, Lukens, Martinez, Mauro, McCloskey, McCormick, Smith, Katie Stewart, and Valdez in the House. These are Dems. Also stop Republicans from being elected, who all voted for this. And then, as far as I can tell, and then Colorado State Senate Democrats voted for this legislation, including Amabil, Dougherty, Hinrichsen, Lindstedt, Mulika, Roberts, and Rodriguez. So if you're in Colorado, look out for these names and stop them, primary them. By the way, Governor Polis still has to sign this legislation that means that workers have to work 56 hours before they get overtime pay into law. You can always email him, and let me go to where you can email him. Let me tell you his email. Sorry. And then we're not editing this. Sorry, you're going to have to hear all this sound because that's just too much work for me. All right, so you can do Governor Polis at state.co.us. Again, that's Governor Polis, Polis, at state.co.us. And you can also always contact him via Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Bug him. On Facebook, he's Jared Polis. On Instagram, GovOfCO. Make his life miserable for signing this. I mean, he most likely will sign. He's very anti-worker, but okay. The other one that's really, really important is the Colorado Worker Protection Act. Colorado is the only state in the country that requires a second election to become a union. So if we want to strike in 2028, and if we want more unions, we need to overturn the law that requires a second election with a 75% majority to collect dues. This is what the Colorado Worker Protection Act, HB 26-1005, would do. It specifies that employees' right to bargain collectively includes the right to bargain collectively concerning any mandatory subject of bargaining. Eliminates the requirement for a second election to negotiate a union security agreement clause in the collective bargaining process. Declares that it is not an unfair practice for an employer to refuse to agree to a lawful proposal made by the exclusive representative of the employees, or for the exclusive representative of the employees to refuse to agree to a lawful proposal made by the employer concerning a mandatory subject of bargaining if the refusing party has bargained in good faith with the other party, and requires employers and employees through their exclusive representative to bargain in good faith. Notice this summary applies. Okay, that's just another little thing. Governor Polis has vetoed a similar bill in a previous session and intends to veto the bill again. Gubernatorial candidates Michael Bennet and Phil Weiser have not committed to signing the bill. Keep pressuring them. Keep fighting. Phil Weiser, I think, is more likely to sign it, I hope, but I don't know. And so we need to really keep the pressure on. This needs to be visible. This stops people from unionizing in Colorado. This stops us from being successful. All right, now I want to talk about local unions. First off, I really want to, and let me find it. I know you guys have to listen to me and all my, it's really important, if you care about unions, get involved with the Colorado Springs Area Labor Council. Les Thompson runs it. They have blue collar breakfasts. If you want to learn anything about unions, if you want to stop by and have a free breakfast, go to the Colorado Springs Area Labor Council Blue Collar Breakfast. It is monthly. They do really great work. They really care. They're like old union strong, and I really appreciate them. Here's some more info about local unions. There's the Colorado Springs Education Association, CSEA. They have had a union contract for decades, and then last year, the D11 school board removed it. They have been under so much pressure. And on May 6th, there will be a school board meeting. Please support teachers there. I think it's at 5 p.m. It's at the location that they usually have school board meetings, but that's not there off the top of my head. And of course, if you DM me, I can give you info and links to get involved with them. Starbucks Workers United. Members are negotiating a contract with Starbucks and are on strike. If you support them, please don't cross the picket line. These are young people who I'm really proud of. I know they're not that young, and there's some people that are older, but I'm really proud that they saw the inequities that they're dealing with. You know, oftentimes putting them under, making them work 6 days a week, but putting them under a certain number of hours so that they don't get benefits, not getting paid enough, not having people enough on staff to provide a good experience for people. Really support Starbucks workers. Please don't cross the picket line. Anyway, another great union locally is the Pikes Peak Education Association. Their D11 is like the D11 school district. That's Colorado Springs Education Association. And then Pikes Peak Education Association is like El Paso County area. And also includes Canyon City. There's also the CS Local 19, which is the Colorado Springs Transit Workers Union. The IBEW, Electrical Workers Union, joined the Union for Better Wages and Benefits. The NALC, there's also the National Letter Carriers Union. They're awesome. They were on strike, I think, recently. A lot of unions have been just not being treated well, which I think goes to show what happens when you put billionaires first and you put people last. And unions put people first. They're not always perfect. Working together as a group is always a pain in the butt. It's always a fight. Democracy is hard. That's why people like fascism, because it's easy, even if ultimately it makes your life miserable. There's LIUNA Local 720, Laborers Rising, is a local union membership engagement initiative that will move members to get involved in their unions by creating a base of member activists. We can build power for our LIUNA families, our communities, and our union. The foundation for the program is laborer-to-laborer conversations while harnessing our members' power to build solidarity. Of course, this isn't everybody. This is just some people. There's the Pikes Peak Library Workers United. We have been organizing as a formalized group for just over a year, and we have already made great strides. As a collective, we have advocated for more opportunities for employees interested in advancing their careers, hands-on self-defense training, better health care, and more. So yeah. And then there's also the Colorado Springs Tenants Union. Through this process of developing regular tenants into powerful political leaders via building level fights, we hope to create the base of organized and politicized tenants necessary to take on moneyed interests in Colorado Springs, tackle the city's affordability crisis, and build a city where housing is treated as a fundamental human right. We envision a Colorado Springs where housing is completely decommodified and residents have control over the places they live. We also have the UPH CBA coalition, which is the union printers home, and that's like a collective bargaining agreement. Sorry, I'm not even saying it right. I'm not going to even try. It is hard to like get all of these different things right. Let me make sure I'm saying this right. But we're working, so their goal is to have a community benefits agreement, sorry, to have a community, so CBA is a community benefits agreement, which again, I'm pretty involved, but it's like not obvious to me. It's basically the community comes together when there's like a big development happening to make sure that the community isn't left behind. So this is what they say: with major redevelopment coming to the historic Union Printers Home, citizens from the Hillside, Nob Hill, and East Lake communities have formed the Union Printers Home Community Benefits Agreement Coalition to address concerns of the redevelopment impact on each of our neighborhoods. We are asking for the investors and developers to address community concerns with us and to guarantee community safety, affordable housing, economic impacts, and labor standards for the construction of the project. And then for more information on other local unions, this is just a snapshot. Go to the Colorado Springs Area Labor Council website and sign up for their website to stay updated on union events in the region. You can stay involved. You like let us know, let me know, you can go to the DSA if you want to try to develop a union with them. The biggest thing is, if there's an area, if there's a union already, get involved in that union. There's also the Carpenters Union, but just keep being involved, keep fighting for good policies, making sure. The big thing in Colorado to me, the biggest issue is making sure that we have the Colorado Worker Protection Act, that we overturn that second election that requires a 75% majority to collect dues. All right, so that's section 1. And now we will go on to our more general things. And I'm not going to get to everything. Hopefully what ends up happening with this is like my rough draft version. And then my hope is that I redo all of these with experts and I refine it and I make it better. This is coming from someone that's a major nerd that in high school wished that they could write a history of the world, but now I know how bad those histories of the world are and how reductive they are. But I'm still trying to make a plan for the government anyway on my own. So obviously this is a rough draft. Obviously check out the other plans in my spreadsheet. I will share it. But we will keep going. Even if it might be ill-fated to get to everything that I want to get to. All right. So the biggest thing we have is corruption in government, and we need to get money out of politics. And then we need to shore up our voting rights and making sure that people are able to engage and vote safely in our country. And that is where people I'm voting for Amanda Gonzalez, and the reason I'm voting for her, and the reason I'm voting for David Seligman, and the reason I'm voting for Julie Gonzalez, and the reason that I'm voting for Phil Weiser is I believe that they will be on top of these things. And they have specific knowledge, especially Amanda Gonzalez, who has run elections as the Jefferson County clerk and recorder. I think it's Jefferson County. Don't quote me on that, but she is a county clerk and recorder. She has the understanding, and she is a lawyer, of what it takes to run an efficient election. And the knowledge beyond just the little research that I do of what election laws need to happen. So I'm going to go off on a tangent here, and I'm sorry for that, but it's happening. The thing is, I'm not an expert. I'm never an expert. That's not my strength. My strength is trying to get a group of people that I know who can be resources, who can act as experts for me and for us, so that we get people like Amanda Gonzalez into the Secretary of State position, and she can tell us what we need to secure our elections, because that's her job. She's worked on legislation to get that done. Same thing with David Seligman, who's been fantastic fighting for workers, who has a really good understanding of how the law works. He talked about, and I really want to interview him in the future to talk about UC Health and how they're able to have $1 billion in not-profit profits because a major thing that I want to talk about for universal health care is making all of our hospitals and medical facilities nonprofit, but we also have to make sure that they're really nonprofits and that they're not skating by and finding ways to not invest back into their facilities and their workers. All right, thanks for the tangent. Volunteer with all those candidates. I will keep repeating, volunteer. Julie Gonzalez in Colorado Springs and El Paso County has door knocking every Saturday. Phil Weiser has door knocking every Sunday. Let's go. All right, so this is going to get into the weeds again, and it's not going to be as pretty as I'd like. My hope is we fill these in with people that we like and respect who can really tell us what we need. But this is what I'm finding. So we need to overturn Citizens United with a constitutional amendment. We need to get rid of the Electoral College. We need to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. This would all be great, but the last time we passed a constitutional amendment was 1992, and here's why. An amendment may be proposed either by the Congress with a 2/3 majority vote in both the House of Representatives and the Senate, or by a constitutional convention called for by 2/3 of the state legislatures. None of the 27 amendments of the Constitution have happened because of a constitutional convention. So whenever people get really freaked out about a constitutional convention, guess what? It's never happened. It has not happened. And then after passing either the House and the Senate, or 2/3 of the 2/3 majority of the House and the Senate, or 2/3 of the state legislature, it needs to be ratified by 3/4 of the states, 38 out of 50 states in their legislatures, or a state convention, depending on the state. When we talked last time about, and let me get his name right, it's not Alito, I know. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Let me go back to, I'm sorry, you guys. This is what happens when you have me doing this. Yeah, whatever. When we say that the Constitution is dead, this is what happens. As Antonin Scalia puts it, the Constitution is dead. When our Constitution is dead, so is our country, because we cannot fix issues. We need to talk about a necessary cultural shift in the meantime with Track APAC, which is controversial in how they decide to do things, but I do think it's really important to understand that a lot of the money in super PACs does not go through the FEC. So you can't look through FEC filings to see who's really backing somebody. And that's why super PACs are so evil. And also look at the integrity index, look at who has made that pledge. A big issue we have with the Constitution is dead, which we see it is. It's only had 27 amendments in like 250 years. And we haven't had one for over 30 years. That's crazy. Originalism is dumb. It's bullshit. It's people that are not historians cherry-picking documents that support how they want to interpret things, and they use it as an excuse to make ideological decisions, often through a shadow docket, which does not show any reasoning. And in a shadow docket case, they just say what they think the answer is. So we have all of these little boy and girl geniuses, the people that rise to the top. This is what happens when you have people that have been told that they are smart, and then you give them a complex problem, and so they get stuck in the problem and they don't think, is this a good question? Originalism is a bad question. We live now. We need a living constitution. Without an amendable constitution, we do not have a living, breathing country in dialogue with itself. We have a country which is pinned down in a historical time, invented by billionaires and zealots. This isn't a real time. This is a made-up time that somehow always aligns with what the far right likes. And Dems have played this game of trying to go through the past and say that they would have supported it. No, just say, I believe trans people have human rights. I believe a corporation isn't a person. And therefore, let's make the case that does not align with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So what we need is a new amendment process. This is coming from what Jill Lepore highlighted in her book, We the People, which was a fantastic history of the amendments to the Constitution. Democracy asked scholars to come up with, which I think is like a journal. I'm not exactly clear. I don't care. I like the idea. Ask scholars to come up with a new amendment process, and this one seems very thoughtful. So what it would take is voting for the amendment by a simple majority in Congress in consecutive sessions, and then have it ratified by popular referendum. Again, if we do not find a way to make the Constitution a living document by and for the people, we will become a nation subsumed into the dustbin of history. And again, we can expand the Supreme Court. We can retract the Supreme Court. There is precedent for this. This one I think is so important because do you hear that? 2 consecutive sessions of Congress and then ratified by popular referendum. If something terrible happens, you can also repeal it. That's both it's both difficult enough, but not so difficult that it can't happen. I think it's a really good idea. I think we need to talk about it. Another thing that we need, ranked choice voting for all elections, up and down the ballot. We need to be talking about, we don't want things like we just had this happen with me and with another candidate. We had 2 progressives. Theirs was a stronger version of it. But they had 2 progressives on the ballot because they got about almost 60% of the vote. But the other candidate had 30% plus. They got on the ballot, and neither of the other 2 candidates got on the ballot. We need to be I think it will hone in better on what's going on with candidates and why people are voting for them if we have ranked choice voting. We also need to pass the For the People Act, which modernizes voter registration and takes other steps to improve the voting access in federal elections. Lots of same day, internal registration, conditions on, just a lot of good stuff in here. I'm not going to read it all. One thing I really liked was prohibit voter caging, campaign activity used to remove or attempt to remove targeted voters from official lists of registered voters. E.g. not taking Black people off the vote. Stopping deceptive practices and preventing voter intimidation. One thing that we did in Colorado that I think is really great, we have pretty good voting in Colorado, is making sure that ballot measures have to be in plain speech, so they have to be understandable. I will say that we had a ballot measure in Colorado Springs, and I just could not make heads or tails of it, and I just couldn't vote on it because I was like, I have no idea what this is supposed to mean. Poll worker recruitment and training. There's just a lot here. It's really, really good. This would just make our election systems better overall. Good practices that are employed in Colorado. I already mentioned one, which is having ballot measures be in plain speech, defend state-run elections against federal attempts to nationalize, protect mail-in voting, same-day registration, drop boxes, and confidential voter registration. So that's kind of just the process of voting and making it better, making it so that you have same day, all those other things. We have the Voting Rights Act because there was voter suppression of Black voters in the South. It was one of our nation's proudest civil rights achievements. It was used to protect us from this sort of voter suppression. So what it did was states and counties with a history of voting discrimination had to pre-approve any changes to their voting rules with the Department of Justice, which stopped thousands of bad laws from taking effect. However, after the 2013 SCOTUS decision, Shelby County versus Holder, it effectively eliminated it. In 2021, the Supreme Court weakened Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act in Brnovich versus the Democratic National Committee. That decision made it more difficult to challenge discriminatory voting laws in court, tilting the playing field in favor of discriminatory states. So what we need to do is restore the Voting Rights Act with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, which, basically restores it. I'm sorry that I'm not going into as much depth as I want to, but let me see if I have it open somewhere. I'm sorry, you guys. Here, Restoring the Voting Rights Act. Let's go over it. And this is from the Brennan Center. I took a lot from the Brennan Center. Like, let's not pretend that I'm doing this research on my own. Absolutely not. So the John Lewis Voting Rights Act would go beyond restoring geographic preclearance and covered certain changes long known to have a discriminatory effect, such as inadequately providing multilingual voting materials and reducing polling locations. And standardized public notice and transparency requires would have been implemented, providing additional protections against any change to voting practices that intentionally or not disenfranchise voters. Let's see if we can find, so that was the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And then there's sorry, thanks for your patience. I mean, this is just what it is. If anyone wants to edit this so it's not as annoying, you tell me. But until then, you're stuck with me. In the Freedom to Vote Act. Let's just look at that one more time. I looked it up before, but we got to look it up again. All right, again from the Brennan Center. So it would bolster our democracy by protecting voting rights, ending partisan gerrymandering, improving campaign finance, and safeguarding the electoral process. Yes, that's the one. That's a good one to have here. Oh yeah, and we'll go over some of the more of the recommendations right now. Let's just do it. The Brennan Center has, I think sometimes they pull a lot of punches, especially when it came to court reform, but I think they have a really good sense for voting rights. So restructuring the FEC to ensure an odd number of commissioners, either 5 or 7, one or more of whom could be required to be registered as an independent, so that when they're investigating an alleged violation, they're able to have a majority response. Have a commissioner serve as chair and its chief administrative officer for a fixed term of 4 to 6 years with sole authority to hire the staff director and other senior administrative personnel, formulate budget requests to Congress, and manage the agency's day-to-day operations. And increase funding to a level that will allow the agency to fulfill its compliance enforcement responsibilities and maintain modern information technology to collect and disseminate campaign finance disclosure data. Boy, is this true. We have software that will only run like the free campaign software, and this is not complicated software, that will only run on Windows instead of on a Mac. So like as a campaign, if you're running for House, you need to purchase a different computer, or I borrowed my friend's computer and tortured them for months because I didn't want to buy a new computer. And it's not that hard. It's just really old software. It should not be that old. They should also pass legislation to restructure the FEC. Okay, yeah, we talked 5 to 7. All right, we're there. They also like the Restoring Integrity to America's Elections Act, introduced by Rep. Derek Kilmer and introduced by Senator Joe Donnelly. Require full disclosure of political spending and dark money donors intended to influence elections, support public financing that allows a broader pool of candidates. We will talk about that. You shouldn't have to be rich to run for office. Oppose the concentration of political power in the hands of the ultra-wealthy and foreign interests. All right. We're only going to look at some of these things. We're going to go back. Sorry. Thanks for that little foray into what the Brennan Center thinks. We also need, let's go back to publicly funded elections. There are 3 different ways that they talk about that. Matching funds, the state matches qualifying donations after a candidate has raised a certain amount of money. In Hawaii, a candidate can still raise private donations, but there can be donation limitations. Then there's vouchers. So a registered voter gets a certain amount of money to donate to a candidate. And then there are grant programs, where Arizona's Clean Election Act provides a detailed example of a grant program that is open to candidates for all statewide and legislative offices. To qualify, candidates for the legislature must raise $5 contributions from at least 200 contributors. This is from Open Secrets, who reside in the candidate's legislative district. Candidates who are approved to participate receive 1 grant during the primary campaign and another grant for the general. The program is funded through a 10% surcharge on some civil penalties and criminal fees, and by the qualifying contributions the candidate raised. So yeah, 3 different ways. Either matching funds, you raise this much, the state meets you there after you've raised a certain amount. Like, it doesn't just go to anybody. You have to have, say, 150 private donations of like $20 or more. Or vouchers are like, hey, which I actually kind of really like. This is a certain amount of money you get to donate to the candidates. Here it is, you choose, which is kind of nice. Or a grant. So you get to a certain threshold, you get a grant. You get to a certain threshold. For them, it's so for example, the example they use is they raise $5 contributions from at least 200 contributors, and then they get a grant, and then they get another grant in the general. Another thing that comes up a lot, which I think is really important because we have a really unfair balance here, is Washington, D.C., which is the poster child of representation of taxation without representation, becoming a state, and Puerto Rico being able to choose whether they would like to become a state. Also having independent redistricting commissions implemented across the country, just as a matter of course. Independent redistricting commissions are interesting. Let me go and look up. Sorry, you're getting this on the fly. Let's look at how ours is structured, which seems to work pretty well. It's not amazing. It's just done pretty well. We worked a lot on this when we were pushing for redistricting for the county commissioner seats. Oh, not my favorite one, but it's, it's very, let's just look at this. Da-da-da. Thanks for your patience with me, you guys. Oh well, some of it is just contiguity, so making sure that all the areas within the district are physically near each other, compactness, so it's not just spread out, making sure the constituents live as near to one another as possible, a community of interest so that you don't cut communities of interest in part, and yeah. So let's go. That one's a little good little thing. And I just want to talk about the structure of yes, this is where, yay. They're a 12-member body of citizen applicants, and they're selected by 3 retired Colorado appellate judges, each with different political party affiliations, who are appointed by the Chief Justice of the Colorado Supreme Court. And they have to have unanimous votes. They have to, commissioners must be registered Colorado voters who voted in each of the last 2 general elections and who have been either unaffiliated with any party or continuously registered with the same party for at least 5 years. Yep. It works really well. You get really excited people in there. At least that's what I've noticed in Colorado. So nonpartisan staff draws and presents a preliminary plan, and then they respond. And I'm forgetting, the one thing I really wanted to see. So, okay, randomly selects 300 applicants affiliated with the state's largest political party, 300 affiliated with the second largest party, and 450 who aren't affiliated with any party. So yeah, that's the thing that I wanted to see. And then the panel then randomly draws 2 names from each subpool to serve as 6 of the commissioners. The majority and minority leaders of the Colorado House and Senate each select 10 applicants who are affiliated with one of the state's 2 largest political parties from the nonpartisan staff's list of eligible applicants. So it's pretty darn cool. It's not fun, it's not interesting, but it does do a good job of making things a little bit better. So this is the Montana plan. According to Open Secrets, if passed by a simple majority, this would address super PACs and corporate funding. The Montana plan would prohibit companies from using money to influence politics by targeting Montana's corporate chartering authority to revoke limited liability or tax advantages if an entity oversteps its authority by trying to use monetary influences to sway politics to the state. And then the Montana plan would fully ban dark money from the state politics by disallowing 501c4 nonprofit corporations from funneling donations from anonymous donors. All right, so that would stop corporations from being able to profiteer, to buy elections. I don't know how it would affect billionaires and billionaires just funneling money, but it would help with the 501c4s, which is how they often funnel money. The only issue is that would only be for state elections and not federal elections with that. So like they couldn't put money, corporations couldn't put money into politics at all because they just like wouldn't be a corporation in Montana. But when it comes to 501c4s, which are those nonprofits that can be used to funnel a bunch of money into elections, it would only apply to state level elections, as far as I can tell. So, yep. So there's like, yes, all these nonpartisan. All right. And these are a few more things I'm just going to go through that were in the Colorado Dem platform. And a lot of it overlaps with the We the People Act and the John Lewis Voters' Rights Advancement Act. Ensure election security through nonpartisan audits, the right to verify and cure ballots, criminalizing intimidation, voter suppression, deliberate misinformation to voters, threats to election staff, or any other act that undermines fair elections, guaranteed voter access regardless of race, gender, party, religious belief, income, housing status, disability, language, active duty military status, or criminal justice history. Support independent redistricting commissions, and except as needed in defense of democracy. And then another one that I thought was really important that they talked about is enforce the 14th Amendment. Those who engage in insurrection are disqualified from office. And the fact that the Supreme Court ruled against that and stopped Colorado from doing that, straight to jail. They should be impeached and removed. Yeah. And so this is where I think like the Brennan Center, this is another thing, goes soft, is that they talk about you should pass the Disclose Act, and all it does is require groups engaging in political spending in state races to disclose their donors. Again, this doesn't curb spending, and like half the time you find out about these things after the fact, and like unless you're really in the know, like it's like for FEC filings, it takes like 3 months to find out where money is happening. You could already have the primary when that happens. They can time things like that where they take all of this corporate PAC money and then you only find out about it after the primary, and they've been running on, I don't take any corporate PAC money. And so I want to go back to, because we're getting close to the end here, yes, we are about at the end. With like getting this passed, it is about getting people in the House, in the Senate. It's getting Julie Gonzalez elected to the Senate. Dear God, Hickenlooper is old. He is 74 years old. Men only live to about 76 and a half years old. He could die in office. And if Michael Bennett makes it, and even if Phil Weiser makes it, they might appoint Jared Polis to the Senate. We need Julie Gonzalez in the Senate. We need Phil Weiser because he actually has fought the Trump administration and understands the stakes. And I also really like him because when he won opioid settlements in the past, he made sure that the money went to the people. And that to me is really, really important, that it went to drug rehab. It didn't get dissipated into the government, that it went to what it was supposed to go to, and that it was effective and it treated the real problem. Because the reason he sued was a bunch of people said, hey, we have a bunch of drug addicts that end up getting into jail. This is, my remembrance of his talking about this, so this might not be entirely accurate. Getting into jail, and they don't need to be in jail or prison. They need to be in rehab, and we don't have rehab. And then coming back and be like, here's the money. How do we make sure these people have the treatment they need? And then David Seligman is a huge fighter for workers and just intelligent and understands what's really going on and is willing to investigate what's really going on, like talking about how saline is insanely expensive because of a monopoly, talking about how UC Health was one of the top debtors in our state even though it's supposedly a nonprofit. And again, I would like to talk to him to find out why that is and how we can structure nonprofits to truly be nonprofits so that the money gets reinvested into better wages, into better equipment, into higher staffing ratios so that we get better quality care instead of profits or buying real estate. But before that happens, right now, it's supporting these kinds of candidates that are grassroots, and then Amanda Gonzalez, who knows how to run an election, and getting them into office. And rewarding the candidates that aren't taking corporate money, that are taking a stand against corporate money, that are grassroots, that are door knocking, that aren't bowling you over. I swear to you, a bank lobbyist, and we just happen to have a really good example of this person that's like very clear cut. You know, we have somebody that's running who was a bank lobbyist for 10 years, then worked for multiple corrupt Congress people. You know, one person was Donna Shalala, who has like millions and millions in different types of stocks like BlackRock and United Healthcare and oil companies. And then another, she also worked for Glusenkamp Perez, who keeps voting for DHS funding. This person has a D by their name, but every step along the way, they have kept talking about how much they have raised as the most important thing about them. They are married to a venture capitalist. The idea that just because somebody has a D next to their name means they're on our side is not true. Michael Bennett is for charter schools. He is not a fighter. He is not comfortable fighting. There are a lot of people that really wish the world could just go back to the way it was, instead of understanding that we have huge systemic issues. $79 trillion taken from the bottom 90% from 1975 to 2023. $79 trillion. That doesn't go away without doing anything. That goes away with a higher minimum wage. That goes away with universal health care. That goes away with affordable housing that includes public housing, that includes co-housing. It goes away with real systemic change. It goes away with when somebody like Kristi Noem steals $220 million from the government, going after her, not only removing her from office, but putting her in prison. Putting Trump and his family in prison. Putting all of the billionaires who have profited off of him, who have gone into our Social Security accounts and gotten our data. There's a lot of work that has to be done, and we need people in office who will fight that fight. Sitting out an election cycle is not okay. We are not more clever. Politics is not 4D chess. We just need to get the people in that will do the right thing. And we need to keep, when we don't pass a good law, when we don't pass like let me go and look back before I misspeak, because, you know, want to do that. When we don't pass the Colorado Workers Protection Act or the Colorado, and we make it so that it takes 75% vote, a second 75% vote to become a union with dues, we sit out time when we could have people organizing. These small victories matter. You will find the opening for what happens later. You will not be able to plan for everything. We need to fight the fight that we have, and we need to get good people into office. And I really appreciate everybody who is out here door knocking. Door knock with Julie Gonzalez on Saturdays, door knock with Phil Weiser on Sundays. Make calls for David Seligman. You as a volunteer are allowed to door knock for whoever you want, have whoever's lit you want with you. Obviously, that's not coming from the campaign. That's from me. But, do what you can. It matters who's in office. And next week, we will talk about healthcare, which is going to be crazy. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you want to know about local unions. Check out the Colorado Springs Area Labor Council website. It doesn't have every union on it. CSEA and PPEA are not on it, but let's just get going. We need to do better, and There's a lot of work to be done. Take a small step, take a small action, door knock. All right, bye-bye.